Now when we've got some trickier fractions, we can do some things to actually still compare them against benchmarks. So if we want to compare 12/36 against the benchmarks of 0 and 1, you might think, oh my goodness, I have to make 36 equal parts? Well, you don't have to do that, because what we can do is use some estimating. If we look at the halfway mark, we can think about how many 36ths that would be. So what's half of 36? Well, half of 30 is 15 and half of 6 is 3. So that's 18. So half is the same as 18/36. And now what we can do is think about where 12 would be. Would it be less than 18 or greater than 18? If it's less than 18, it's going to be closer to 0. And if the numerator of 12 is greater than 18, it would be closer to 1. Well, we know 12 is less than 18. So that means 12/36 is going to be in that area. And that means it's closer to 0. And that's all we need to do for that one. Now this time, is it closer to 0 or 1/2? So we're not comparing it to 0 and 1 this time. And we're going to use the same approach. We've got 13/28. So let's mark the halfway mark as half of 28, which is 14, and change that to 14/28. Now we've got 13/28. So 13 comes right before 14. So that means it's going to be right next door, just to the left. So you might say, well, it's closer to 0 than 1, but we're actually checking whether it's closer to 0 or half. And you can see how close it is to half, but it's further from 0. So once again, by thinking of estimating, we can see that it's closer to half than it is to 0. Well, it's not always that clear though. So this is a case where we have to do a couple of extra steps. Let's use the process again of marking our halfway point using the same denominator that our number has. And we've got 7/30. So if the denominator is 30, half is going to be 15. So half is the same as 15/30. Now, when we look at 7, our numerator, that's somewhere in there. And it's not really clear whereabouts it is and if it's closer to 0 or a half. So it's kind of a bit hard to know. What if we divide that section into half again? Well, we've got 15/30 in that section. So half of 15 would mean there are, 7 is half of 14 and 8 is half of 16. It's actually 7.5. But we'll write 7.5. And let's call that 7.5/30. Now it might seem unusual, but we wouldn't want to write 7.5/30. That's like a fraction within a fraction. So decimals is okay. Now what we've got is we've got a place to judge that against. Is 7 less than 7.5 or greater than 7.5? Well, it's just a bit smaller than 7.5. So it's only just on that side, which means it's closer to 0 than it is to half. So we had to drill down a little bit. But we got there, and we know it's closer to 0 than it is to half. In fact, estimating is such a good way to think about how big our fractions are and comparing them to our benchmarks.